Hey everybody. So Windows 11 has been around now for roughly a year and a half. Here it is, going on March of 2023. We are already on our second annual release of course, Windows 11. The original release was 21H2, and then now we have 22H2, which did fix some issues with Windows 11, but it also introduced some things I didn't really like. For example, I'm trying to basically force you, even on a pro version of Windows 11, to connect to the internet and set up a Microsoft account, just a complete setup. But there's one big thing that really has not changed with Windows 11, and that is the EliteClass minimum system requirements to run the OS. And of course, I call them the Microsoft EliteClass minimum system requirements for Windows 11 because they are elite class. When you look at this, when you look at those requirements, they require TPM 2.0, but they also require at least an 8th gen Intel Core series CPU or an AMD Ryzen 2nd gen. Even some of the 2000 series Ryzens would not meet this requirement. So computers that were made in 2017, a lot of computers out there made in 2017 would not meet requirements, or 2018 would not meet requirements. So computers that were at the time 3 years old on the date of Windows 11 release were deemed not meeting the requirements. And that was one of the biggest things about Windows 11, I think. It's probably one of the most critical things about Windows 11 are those insanely high requirements. So yeah, the CPUs are the most insane part of the requirements, and the TPM would fall in next in line. And of course, the requirement to have secure boot enabled. The rest of the requirements, so I mean, the dual core CPU, 4 gigabytes of RAM, 64 gigabytes of storage. Those are not such elite class requirements. Those are pretty reasonable requirements. I'd say minimum requirements to run the OS. So the thing is about Windows 11 is there are so many ways that you can get around those elite class requirements. One of the biggest and most common ways, I think, is to use Rufus. Rufus has it built right into the utility. You can actually download the ISO for Windows 11 right from Rufus, or you can download it from Microsoft's website. And once you download it and you go to write it to a USB stick, it will prompt you with options to bypass the CPU and TPM and secure boot checks, all that good stuff. But it also will allow you to bypass the requirement for an internet connection, just a complete setup, among other things. And the thing is, Windows 11, it will run and actually run quite well on hardware that is well below the Microsoft EliteClass minimum system requirements for Windows 11. And of course, Microsoft EliteClass is not an actual Microsoft term. It's not something they come up with. It's a nickname that I come up with here to describe, of course, those requirements being EliteClass. They're ridiculously high. So the big question is, what can you run Windows 11 on? So that's the biggest question, is what can you run it on? And the next question would be, will you receive updates and security patches? Okay, so first and foremost, I've actually done a lot of testing on unsupported hardware that does not meet the elite class requirements. And I have found that Windows 11 will actually install and run on hardware on the Intel side of things down to, let's say, an Aspire 1 netbook, an Atom CPU. Yes, stuff that's that underpowered. Now, I've actually tested it on other stuff too. For example, the lowest end system I've ever installed Windows 11 on the Intel side of things would be the Celeron D356. And that hardware was so low end that I actually had to begin the installation on a different computer And then once they got to the reboot stage, I just would take the hard drive or took the SSD out, popped it back into the system with the Celeron-D and complete setup. Because even when you bypass the system requirements or the checks, there is still a hard requirement for two CPU cores, either physical or logical. And of course, the Celeron-D 356 only was a single core with one thread, therefore it would not pass the check. It didn't run exactly well, and that's something, of course, that would be expected. It did not run well on that. But on the Intel side of things, I'm going to say that you can install and run Windows 11 pretty dang well on anything down to an Intel Core 2 Duo. Give it 4 gigabytes of RAM or more, give it a solid state drive, and I can almost guarantee you that Windows 11 would run well on that. On the AMD side of things, okay, so on the AMD side of things, I've done some testing to see how far down you can install Windows 11. And the cutoff for Windows 11 on AMD would be socket AM2. Anything lower than socket AM2, it will not install. For example, socket 754 and 939, of course, those K8 CPUs, of course, they supported 64-bit, but they didn't support the proper instructions to run Windows 11 because Windows 11 only came in 64-bit, and those processors could not run Windows 10 64-bit, but they could run Windows 10 32-bit. Therefore, the minimum you can run Windows 11 on the AMD side of things would be socket AM2. I've actually ran it on a system I nicknamed the Trash AM2 system. Had it spec very low end with a Sempron CPU. Now, I can't remember if that was a single or dual core. I may have started the installation on a dual core CPU and then swapped in a Sempron similar to the Celeron-D. So it ran on that, but of course it didn't run too well because of course it was a Sempron. But if you upgrade, of course, to the Athlon 64X2 dual core, you would then meet the dual core CPU requirement. And if you spec that hardware with at least 4 gigabytes of memory, recommend 8 gigabytes, it can be DDR2, throw in an SSD, Windows 11 would run okay on that. Can't say it would run super well, but it would run okay on it. Flipping back to the Intel side of things, I mentioned about my recommendation for minimum for the CPU would be a Core 2 Duo. A good example would be my Inspiron 1525, my Dell Inspiron 1525 laptop. It has a Core 2 Duo, I think it's a T9300 CPU. I think it's 2.5 gigahertz, 4 gigabytes of RAM, and it has, of course, the Intel, I think it's a 965 graphics chipset. It has a 240 gigabyte SSD. It runs Windows 11 flawlessly. It runs it fast. So, yes, those are some good examples of what you could actually run Windows 11 on, and it would actually run decently well. Another example of older AMD hardware would be the A-series APUs on the socket. I think it's the FM2 Plus CPU. And of course, my Windows 11 test rig. It's a AMD A6 6420K based setup. The APU has a bit of overclock on it. It's a 4 gigahertz APU, and I think I got it at 4.6 gigahertz or something like that, 4.4 or 4.6 gigahertz. And it has 4 gigabytes of memory, has a 240 gigabyte SSD. It runs Windows 11 really well. And of course, that system, as I think I mentioned in every video, a feature of it now, of course, it doesn't meet the Microsoft EliteClass Windows System requirements run Windows 11, but yet it runs Windows 11 just fine. So, the question again, okay, and I think I've talked about this in previous videos, is why is Microsoft setting the minimum requirements so high when Windows 11 can run on stuff down here? They say it's in the name of security. But if that's the case, then why aren't the requirements hard? So, for example, you could take a Windows 11 ISO image and you could write it to a flash drive and clean install Windows 11 on hardware that's well below the EliteClass requirements. So, if those were hard requirements, then theoretically it should not allow you to install the OS on that. but it does. A theory that I've heard from other larger tech YouTubers is Microsoft could be doing a favor for the OEMs, the computer OEMs, to artificially raise the system requirements high enough to where people would throw away their existing good computers just because they don't meet the Elite Class minimum system requirements on Windows 11, and go out and buy a new computer that meets the Elite Class minimum system requirements on Windows 11. Okay, then considering that Windows 11 can run decently well on anything down to an Intel Core 2 Duo Socket 775 or an AMD Socket AM2 Athlon 64X2, then do you receive updates when you install Windows 11 on something that old? Well, the answer is yes and no. From my findings, you will receive security patches and hotfixes, but you will not automatically receive feature upgrades. So typically the lifespan on a Microsoft Windows feature upgrade for Windows 10 and Windows 11 is roughly, 1.5 years? So after a year and a half, they generally stop supporting that feature build, and you must upgrade to the next feature build. So when you're not getting them automatically, you eventually will lose out on security patches and stuff like that. But the workaround for that is you would have to manually install those feature builds yourself. You would install them similar to the way you install Windows 11 on your system not meeting the Microsoft EliteClass minimum system requirements. So you would download the ISO through Rufus or from Microsoft's website. Then you would use Rufus to write the USB installer, and then you would use that installer to do an in-place upgrade to the newer Windows 11 build. Okay, with that being said, would I recommend that you install Windows 11 on systems that do not meet the Elite Class requirements? It's kind of a mixed bag. Okay, so if it's your own computer and you're not selling it to somebody, or it's your friend's computer, maybe, and you're going to be offering support for that computer, by all means, that's totally up to you. Go ahead. But if you're selling a computer that you may never see again, you may never provide support for ever again, then at this time I wouldn't recommend it, because in a year and a half you could have a system out there that is basically like Windows 7 or Windows 8 and unsupported Windows, which is not a good thing from a security standpoint. Okay, so another question could be, okay, would Microsoft possibly lift these requirements to the point where they're not so elite class? It's a possibility. Once Windows 10 gets very close to its end of service life, and of course Windows 10 I predict will still have a high usage share in 2025, because there's going to be a lot of computers out there that consumers will rightfully choose to not throw away, because they don't support Windows 11, or Windows 11 doesn't support them. So there's going to be a lot of computers out there still running Windows 10, and if Microsoft's going to be retiring Windows 10, then perhaps they may need to go back to the drawing board and reevaluate those Elite Class requirements, because if they're doing it from a security standpoint, it's never a good thing to have a whole lot of computers out there connected to the internet that are not receiving security patches and fixes. It's not a good thing. So Microsoft could indeed, near the end of Windows 10's support cycle, relax the requirements of Windows 11. It's a possibility. It could happen. It would probably explain why those Elite Class requirements that you see when you go into Windows Update on Windows 10, when it says this computer cannot run Windows 11, I guess it would explain why those are not hard requirements that you try to actually clean install the OS. If those requirements were set in stone, meaning they were permanent, then I think the installer would not even let you do a clean install on a system unless the system was Elite Class certified. So anyways, That's my opinions on the matter. Now, of course, those minimum requirements that I specified, what you can actually run Windows 11 down to, again, you have to keep in mind those are technically unsupported requirements as of now. So, if you install Windows 11 on a system of that age, there is a chance that you could not receive updates. I mean, again, as I mentioned, from what I'm finding, Windows 11, you'll still receive security patches and hotfixes for the lifespan of that feature build, but you would have to manually upgrade to a newer feature build yourself, so you wouldn't get them automatically. And of course, you would not receive support from Microsoft because, well, you installed Windows 11 on a system that was not EliteClass certified. And by EliteClass certified, I mean a computer that meets those minimum system requirements set forth by Microsoft to run the new shiny OS. So, anyways, again, just my opinions. If you want to install Windows 11 on a system that does not meet the requirements, that is totally up to you, but of course, that's your responsibility. So, anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Well, everybody, that wraps it up for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like the video, leave a comment, subscribe to QComputer channel, and be sure to tick the bell, that way you get notified of new video posts. Also, I recommend following QComputer Company on Facebook. A link is in the video description. In addition to computer tech videos, I have a second channel, CubeCompMTDX. Links are available at the end of this video. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching and your support.